Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan from Chess Gyaan Academy, and this is a video that's in partnership with FollowChess, where we bring you a daily coverage of 21 great players from the past who had the potential to become world champion but just fell short by little. So we are now on day 5 of this 21-day series, and the topic is named 21 Gems of Chess. So the today's star hoops game we are going to look at is the living legend Dutch Grandmaster Jan Timman. And Jan Timman was at his peak of his career was considered to be the best of the West as a non-USSR player who had who was leading the non-USSR players basically. And his peak rating was 2680 in January 1990, and he has played the candidates quite a few times. And we have seen him write some very famous and best-selling books in chess. And the playing style of Jan Timman is very challenging to, like, basically he will try to play where their opponents are in strength, and he would try to play and he's a very fearless chess player. So today we are going to see a game that he played against another grandmaster, Vlastimil Jansa, in 1972 in Ivan Parcetic Memorial. So Jan Timman has the white pieces and he goes 1c4. So as I earlier mentioned, Timman has a very fearless style of play. He also had a very wide repertoire. I mean, his main move as white was 1e4, but he also has played a lot of games with 1d4, 1 knight f3, and 1c4. In this game, he went 1c4. Black replied with e5. White went knight c3, and I'm pretty sure you all know now. Currently, the most popular move and is knight f6, and so many games continue with g3, d5, and so on. But in this game, Black responded with 2d6, which is a more solid but okay kind of not so open structure, I would say. And maybe Black is aiming for some sort of a King's Indian structure also. So White went d4, and if Black played the most logical move, it should be e takes d4, and also this is the most popular move for Black in this position. White would take queen takes d4, knight c6, queen d2. And here, if Black goes knight f6, White would go b3, g6, bishop b2, bishop g7, g3, short castle, and bishop g2. So the game is mainly revolving around how much pressure that White can have on this square. So when Black goes rook e8, White does not go knight f3, which would be the most normal developing move, but White instead would go knight h3, so that he can go knight f4 and exert additional control over the d5 central square. And I think White is slightly better in this particular position. So in the game, for the third move d4, Black did not play e takes d4, but instead Black went knight d7. So White played e4 and Black played g6. So now the game has transposed to King's Indian structures, and White goes knight f3, bishop g7, bishop e2. So here, one of the key ideas in King's Indian for Black is to play the f5 break. So it makes sense maybe to go knight e7 instead of knight gf6, which was played in the game. But if knight e7 is played, then like f5 is an immediate idea for Black. But White will just simply short castles, and White would go bishop e3. So if Black goes f5 and tries to play f4 and create an attack on the king side, White can play e takes f5. If g takes f5, White has knight g5, and this is a problem for Black because this e6 square is very weak. And if f4, White can go knight e6, queen e8, and win exchange by taking on c7 and then take on e8. And maybe before taking on c7, he can play a move like bishop h5 also, and then next move he can take knight c7 and get a lot of material advantage. So for f5, e takes f5. If Black decides to capture with the knight, then White would go bishop g5, bishop f6, bishop takes f6, queen f6. And even here I feel White is better because one, Black's king is very weak, as the Fianchetto bishop on g7 is now exchanged, and there is no attacking ideas for black on the king side. But white can access squares like d5 and even b5 and put pressure on the c7 pawn, and at some point white can even play something like d takes e5, d takes e5 and try to go queen d5 check and so on. So white has an advantage in this position also. So this is if for knight e7 on move 6, which was not played in the game. If black played knight e7, we were looking at short castle, bishop e3, and if f5 was the variation that we just discussed. If let's say black is more cautious and plays h6 as a preparatory move to cover the g5 square so that the knight g5 is not a threat, and now if he threatens to play f5, white simply goes queen d2, king hits 7, d takes e5, d takes e5, and rook a d1. So here there is tremendous amount of pressure that white is putting on the d file, and even if black plays something like f5, it could be very risky for black, because then white can consider moves like e takes f5, g takes f5, and maybe even queen c2 and try to pin the king on this b1 h7 diagonal. That's one option, and another is white can simply even try to go some moves like bishop c5 even if attacked with f5 f4, because when white goes bishop c5, the knight cannot play knight takes c5. So white has a lead in development and more space control, so definitely white is a preferable side in this position. So let's go back to the game. So on the sixth move, when white played bishop e2, Jansa grandmaster played knight gf6 in this position, and white went d5. So if black goes knight c5, white simply goes queen c2 defending this e4 pawn, and if a5, bishop e3, short castles, and white can go knight d2. And a very standard position that arises from King's Indian structures is what we have here. In the game, on move 7 for d5, black continued short castle, and white clearly has bunch of options here. White went short castling in the game, but white could have tried if needed. He could have played bishop e3, knight g4, bishop g5, f6, bishop h4, and a lot of games have been played in this particular position, so you can check out those games in your database. And the other option instead of bishop e3 would be bishop g5, where after h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, knight h5, and black is doing fine as he is creating his own counterplay in this position. So let's get back to the game continuation. On move 7 after d5, short castle, white also short castle, and black went knight c5. So the square is temporarily like an outpost unless if white can play b4, if not the knight is kind of solidly placed on knight c5. So white goes queen c2 and defending the e4 pawn, and black goes a5, that's by not allowing white to go b4. So if white goes bishop e3, which in my opinion is more natural than the game continuation, black would respond with b6 as white is threatening to play bishop takes e5 and threaten to play knight takes e5. So if b6, so that if bishop c5, black can capture back with a b pawn. And white goes knight d2, now knight g4, bishop takes g4, bishop takes g4, a3, now all ready for b4, and in case if black goes a4, white may even actively consider taking here and taking this pawn on a4. So instead of sacrificing a pawn, black can go back bishop d7 for a3, and if b4 he can go back knight b7. So even though the knight is very passive on b7, I think it's doing a very critical role of if b takes a5 he can capture knight takes a5, and also black's next few moves is going to be focused on the king side with pawn breaks like f5 and then g5, f4, and so on, and black will generate a lot of counterplay on the king side. White can also try to create his own counterplay on the queen side with c5 kind of pawn breaks, but I think there will be a lot of mass trades on the queen side and the position would kind of equalize in my opinion. So this is what would have happened if white had played the most natural bishop e3 on move 10. Instead, Timman played bishop g5, provoking h6, and then he went bishop e3. So the same recommendation that I gave when if white had gone directly bishop e3, black should have played b6, which is the most logical move, and white would go knight d2, and there is a lot of games in database in this particular position. So this is one option for black. Another options are knight h5, where black tries to get some counter play via knight f4 or f5 break immediately, and if white goes g3, bishop h3, rook fe1, b6, a3, a pretty complicated position in my opinion. So this is if black had gone 11 knight h5. Another option for black on 11th move is knight fd7. So he's now protecting the c5 knight, and if knight d2, black goes with f5. If e takes f5, g f5, f4, we have a very tense struggle ahead of us, as the black can also decide if he wants to go e4 or e takes f4 or keep the pawn as it is on e5, and I think even a move like b6 can be actively considered for black in this particular position. So in the game, none of this happened. Black went knight g4, which is a mistake in my opinion, and this kind of sets the tone of this game. After this, black did not really have much of a chance to get back into the game, and this was a big strategic mistake in my opinion, as anyway white I think was threatening to take bishop takes c5, so it doesn't make much sense why black would go knight g4 and force white to play bishop takes c5. So bishop takes c5 was played, d takes c5, h3, knight f6, and white captures the pawn on e5. So it's not like black blundered a pawn, as black played knight d5 and he's getting his pawn back. But the problem in this position is that c takes d5 is a good move which was played in the game. Just for the sake of analysis, let's see what happens if white captures with the e pawn. Then black would play bishop takes e5, and black has very good control of, like let's say this diagonal, and also now this diagonal, and also this diagonal. So black can easily come queen g5 or queen h4 as required, and then bishop d4 or bishop d6 as needed, and generate a lot of threats around the white king, and especially the g2, h3, h2 squares. So this is just an unclear position, but I would think it's very easy to play as black in this particular position. This is the reason why 15th move e takes d5 would be bad for white. Instead, white played the correct response, which is c takes d5 here. So here bishop takes e5 and white gets f4. The reason why c takes d5 is good is because look at the formidable center for white. White has 2 pawns on the center of the board, black has none, and black has doubled pawns on the queen side, and not much of play that can be generated on the queen side, even though black has a pawn superiority on the queen side. So for f4, black goes bishop d4 check, king h2. There are quite a bit of games played up to this point, and even few moves later also, and the statistics say white scored around 64% in this particular position, and I'm not surprised by that, because the moves for white are very easy in my opinion. Mainly it's going to be pushing in the center with e5 kind of move, and then going knight e4, knight f6 or so on, and also possibly rook a d1 and put pressure on the d file. So white has a lot of initiative related moves that he can easily find, but black has to be playing a role of defense and try to stop white's threats. So here black went c6 in the game, which in my opinion is a dubious move. An interesting but a risky alternative for black would have been g5. The idea of g5 is to kind of remove this f4 pawn so that black gets an access to this critical e5 square. But in return, as black played g5, black has exposed his king also quite a bit. So this is the problem with g5, but also at the same time getting access to e5 square could be worth it. So for g5, white would go knight b5, and black, as I said, g5 was aimed at giving the bishop a square to e5, so black would not be happy to give up the d4 bishop. So if something like g takes f4 is played, white would just capture on d4 and go rook f4, and black would be in big trouble. So instead black went bishop g7, and then if e5, g takes f4, queen e4, and idea of bishop d3, and in this position black goes queen g5, bishop d3, f5, and queen e2 back. So even though white is a pawn down, c7 is under pressure, f4 is a doubled pawn, c5 is also under pressure in the long run. White can play e6 and restrict this bishop rook. Black, in my opinion, is in big danger here. But this I think would have at least tried to complicate the game a bit than the continuation that was played by black, which is c6, which is not a fighting move and just accepting the fact that he has weaknesses, strategic and long-term weaknesses, and just doesn't create any chances or even a slightest bit of counterplay, in my opinion. So white correctly played d takes c6, b takes c6. So even though now white does not have the same formidable control of the center as the d5 pawn is now exchanged, the good thing of playing d takes c6 is now the bishop on e2 gets activated on c4. This is the powerful diagonal, as white can soon play e5 and then threaten moves like queen takes g6. And by playing bishop c4, white also has taken control of this critical e6 square, which black may have been happy to put his bishop at some point with bishop e6. So that's the good thing about bishop c4. So black goes rook b8, and instead of rook b8 if queen h4, I think white would have just completed his development with rook e1 or rook d1, and white is doing great. So black went rook b8, and here this particular position was reached for the first time in 1970, and the game that we are looking at was played on 1972. In 1970, Gligorich had this position as white against a player named Langweg in Amsterdam in 1970, and in that game white went rook a e1, which is also similar ideas. White wants to go e5 and go e6 and so on, but the key difference between d1 and e1 is that white does not have access to the third rank, which would be possible if you go rook d1, because then you can go rook d3, rook g3 and so on, which was played as an idea in the game. But with rook e1 that is not possible. So rook e1, if queen h4, white can go b3, and then so this b3 move allows white to free his knight, so he can go knight e2 or knight a4 or wherever he pleases to go with. So for b3, if black goes g5, white goes knight e2, bishop f2, rook d1, gf4, rook d3. So we were following the game Gligorich Langweg up to this point. But instead of rook d3, Gligorich had a big improvement, in my opinion. He could have just simply gone e5 with the deadly threat of queen g6. And in case of bishop takes h3 or something, white can go queen g6, king h8, queen f6 check. And after queen takes f6, e takes f6, both the bishops are hanging, so white wins material. Instead of bishop takes h3 on move 24, if black had gone bishop g3 check, white would simply go king g1, queen g5, knight takes g3, queen g3, and try to find a move that's just too strong, and that move is 27th move, going rook to d6. So the idea of rook d6 is not picking up this pawn. That is one of the ideas, but the key idea is threatening rook g6 check and win the queen, because there's a queen on c2 that would defend the rook. So rook d6, and black is in big danger. I think a good option for black would be here to resign. So this was all the variations that we saw after 20th move rook e1 that was played by Gligorich. But in this game, white played Grandmaster Jan Timman played rook a d1, which was a new move / novelty in 1972. And black goes queen h4, white played b3. So again, the idea of b3 is the same. He wants to go knight e2 and kind of push this bishop away so the rook can access squares like d6. So black goes g5. Now he's trying to create some chances, but at the same time he's weakening his king side even worse. But I think it's already too late. Maybe here one option for black would have been maybe go rook d8, and if knight e2, go rook b7. Black is still pretty much worse, and white should be very easily convert his advantage with so many weaknesses for black, like this pawn on a5 is weak, c5 is weak. So white can choose if he wants to win this game tactically or positionally in long term basis. But I think at least this the game would have just kept going, but black decides to fast quickly paces loose his loss in this game by going g5. But if, as I was earlier mentioning, it gives maybe some slight chances if white goes wrong, but the player whom we are talking about here is a very experienced and a strong grandmaster, so very less chance for going wrong as the white pieces. So as planned behind the idea of b3, white goes knight e2. and if g takes f4 is played, white can simply capture on d4, c takes d4, rook d4, and next is queen d2 could be is an idea and pick up the f4 pawn, or rook d6 is an idea, e5 is an idea, and white is having a huge advantage. So for 22nd move knight e2, black did not play g takes f4, instead black played bishop to g7. So here there are bunch of excellent moves. So I want to show the alternate moves other than the text, which are also equally good in my opinion. One of that is e5. So we've been regularly talking about this e5 move after the bishop landed on c4, because this diagonal is also a big problem for black, and we can see it by g takes f4, knight takes f4. If bishop e5, white has queen e4, and this is a big problem for black. In case if we go something like rook e8 now, white threatens to go queen g6 check, and bishop takes f7, queen takes f7. This is one of the ideas that white has in this position, and there are many other moves also which will help white win in this particular position. So e5 is a very strong move on move 23, and another strong move is rook to d6. And if g takes f4, white can go rook g6, and after king h7, even giving up the exchange is good for white. Rook takes g7, king g7, knight f4, and white is threatening moves like queen c3 and e5 and whatnot, and black's king cannot really be defended with such poor placement of rooks and pawns. In the game, white decided to play a more controlled way to win the game, in my opinion. He went rook d3, so his idea is to go rook g3 and then put pressure on the g file and attack the king on the g file. So black goes bishop g4, white went rook g3, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, and if g takes f4 was played, which was not played in the game though, white simply goes rook g4, queen f6, e5, queen e7, and rook takes f4, rook 1 f4. So here the ideas would be rook f5 or rook f3 followed by doubling up on the g file and just exploit the poor placement of the black king and win the game. So instead of 25th move g takes f4, black played king h8 and white played rook g4, queen h5, f takes g5. So here if black goes h5, capture the pawn back, white would go rook f5, and look at how well positioned the white pieces are. As you can see, white has a light square bishop, and you can see all the remaining pieces white has placed on the light squares except for the king, and even that I think white would feel more happy if he can go g3, king g2 and place it on a light square too. So after rook f5, if black goes f6 to defend the g5 pawn, white can simply go e5, and if rook b8, go e6, and the position is just collapsing for black. So in the game, for 27th move f takes g5, black went bishop e5 check, and white goes g3, h5, and king g2. So now the king is also on the light square. So all the white's pieces are on the light squares, and they all feel very safe, and all are playing a very active role. So black goes queen g6, white plays h4, f6, and rook f5. So h5 is a threat. Black went rook b7 and white captured h takes g5, and black goes rook g7. And for this, white played g takes f6, and black resigned here, because if queen takes g4, white simply captures f takes g7, and if queen takes g7, white has queen h5 check, and the queen has to move, black queen, and then white just picks up the rook on f8. So black realized that after g takes f6, there is no good way to proceed the game further, so black decided to resign. So if we have to do a quick recap of where black initially went wrong, I would clearly say this was knight g4, a big strategic mistake, forcing I mean, why would you force white to play bishop c5? And this was move 11, and when you look at move 15, 4 moves later, after bishop takes e5, you see how much the position has changed in favor of white, and especially the control of the light squares and the strong center. So this was the first big mistake, and after this, black did not really have a chance, as white played very sensible and easy to understand moves like bishop c4, rook a d1, b3. I mean, very logical, nothing spectacular moves, but very simple logical moves that just increased his advantage, and he managed to win the game in a very simple fashion. So this was the game between Grandmaster Jan Timman and Vlastimil Jansa, and as you may have known, this is the fifth day of the series. We have already done 4 videos of different grandmasters. Yesterday we talked about Grandmaster Paul Keres. The other day we talked about FM Geller. One day we talked about Grandmaster Reshavetsky. One day about Grandmaster Bololevsky. So tomorrow we will come up with a spectacular or one of the best games of a different grandmaster, and this is a video that is brought to you by myself, Grandmaster Priyadharshan from Chess Gyaan Academy and FollowChess app. So I hope everyone is also staying safe wherever they are, and enjoying following their favorite sport, or playing a lot of online chess tournaments that's happening. So everyone stay safe. I'll see you all tomorrow with a different Grandmasters game, and bye bye.